What if I told you that everything you believed was untrue? The history we are accustomed to often focuses on the confrontation between the West and the East. However, at the beginning of the 15th century, an event occurred that completely changed this paradigm and rewrote the rules of the game on the European continent. It was a great battle, where two enemies united against a common and very powerful adversary. It was a battle in which chivalry clashed with pragmatism, and the old military machine of Europe failed, finding itself powerless against a new strategy. For many centuries, the Teutonic Order, this military giant clad in white cloaks with black crosses, dominated northern and eastern Europe. Its knights, fanatically devoted to the idea of the Crusades, seized lands, built impregnable castles, and controlled trade. It seemed that this force had no equal and that their expansion knew no bounds. They were a symbol of invincibility, the embodiment of the military machine of the Middle Ages, covering up their aggressive ambitions with religious slogans. But in the East, a new force was rising, the Kingdom of Poland and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, which had recently formed a dynastic union. This union was, in essence, a marriage of convenience between Catholic Poland and pagan Lithuania, which had only just been baptized. The Teutonic Knights considered this union to be short-lived, but they were greatly mistaken in their predictions. This alliance became an iron fist, ready to repel the Crusaders. Watch the video to the end to find out how the Grand Master of the Teutonic Order made a fatal mistake that led to the crushing defeat of the Crusaders, and why it was not only swords but also the wit of the commanders that won this battle. Are you ready to learn the truth about the Teutonic Order, which we were taught in school was an invincible force? The Teutonic Order, which emerged during the era of the Crusades, had transformed from a monastic brotherhood into a powerful military territorial state by the beginning of the 15th century. Its center, Marienburg Castle, was not just a fortress, but a symbol of their power, the largest brick fortress in Europe. Their lands stretched along the Baltic Sea, controlling important trade routes and possessing rich resources. The order covered up its conquest with the idea of fighting paganism and spreading Christianity. In reality, the Crusades to Prussia and Lithuania were pure colonial expansion aimed at seizing land and forcing the local population into submission. Every year, guests flocked to Prussia, knights from all over Europe who wanted to participate in the Holy War, which constantly strengthened the military potential of the order. However, in 1386, a strategic shift occurred that marked the beginning of the end for Teutonic power. The pagan Lithuanian prince Jogaila married the Polish queen Jadwiga and converted to Catholicism, becoming the Polish king Władysław II. This event, known as the Union of Krzyż, united Poland and Lithuania into a single military political alliance. As a result, the Teutonic Order lost its main ideological trump card. It no longer had pagans against whom it could wage crusades. The order did not accept this. The Teutonic Knights continued to accuse Jogaila of insincerity in his faith, claiming that Lithuania was still a pagan land and that this was only a cover for continuing its aggressive policy. In reality, they were not so much concerned about faith as they were about the loss of the rich Lithuanian lands they had planned to seize. The Grand Duke of Lithuania, Vytautas, Jogaila's cousin, initially clashed with him, but later, realizing the common threat, joined the alliance, finally strengthening it. Which of the Teutonic Order's motives, religious fanaticism or thirst for land, do you think was more dominant? Share your opinion in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the continuation of this fascinating story. Guess how long it took Jogaila and Vytautas to assemble a huge allied army? This process was not just preparation for a campaign, but a truly grandiose logistical operation involving politics, diplomacy, resource management, and military organization. Polish banners and Lithuanian regiments arriving from different corners of the kingdoms converged for weeks at the crossings on the Vistula. It was here that their final union was to take place, and the joint campaign against one of the most powerful military orders in Europe was to begin. King Jogaila's army numbered about 20,000 soldiers, Heavily armed knights, numerous infantry, and artillery, which at that time was considered a technical innovation capable of deciding the outcome of the most stubborn sieges. Vytautas brought about 11,000 fighters, Lithuanians, Russians, Samogitian troops, as well as the famous Tatar cavalry, whose speed and maneuverability inspired fear in every enemy. It was a multilingual and multifaceted army, united by a common goal and a common enemy. The main strategic task was to cross the Vistula unnoticed, without giving the Teutonic Order time to prepare its defenses and concentrate its forces. Here, Jogaila demonstrated not only determination, but also a truly brilliant military mind. He ordered the construction of a huge pontoon bridge, but not on the shore, but far from the enemy's eyes, disassembled, hidden, ready for quick assembly at the right moment. Each section of the bridge was delivered to the crossing point secretly, under cover of night, along difficult roads, which in itself was an outstanding example of medieval logistics. Ready to find out how Jogaila and Vytautas turned the natural landscape into their main strategic weapon and their diverse army into a deadly trap for the best knights in Europe? Then don't miss the next chapter, which reveals how the Polish-Lithuanian commanders outmaneuvered the Grand Master not only with force, but also with psychological warfare. You've definitely never heard about this unique secret. The Battle of Grunwald began long before the first clash of swords. It began as a sophisticated psychological duel between King Jogaila and Grand Master Ulrich von Jungingen. Jungingen, self-confident and impatient, sought immediate battle, while Jogaila played on his opponent's nerves, using tactics of provocation and waiting. It was a true masterclass in manipulation. The morning of July 15, 1410 was hot, and this heat became Jogaila's first ally. He deliberately delayed the start of the battle, ordering his troops to stand still for a long time. The Knights of the Order, encased in heavy armor, languished under the scorching sun. The heavy metal armor, which was effective in battle, turned into a real oven while they waited. Seeing that the enemy troops were not moving, Jungingen made his first psychological move. He sent 2 heralds to Jogaila with 2 naked swords, which was an insulting challenge. The heralds told the king that the master was giving him these swords to help him in battle, hinting at his indecision and cowardice. It was a deliberate act of humiliation. Jogaila, who had been listening to Mass, accepted the swords with extraordinary calm. He replied that he would accept these swords as an omen of victory, and that, although his army did not need help, he was ready for battle. This calmness in response to direct provocation was a powerful psychological blow. The king did not give in to his emotions and did not start the battle on unfavorable terms. Jogaila's true cunning lay in the following. He allowed his soldiers to remove their armor to rest, and most importantly, to drink water from the marshy lakes and streams on the flanks. The whole scene, with the masses, the gift of swords, and the long delay, was a brilliant performance. It showed that King Jogaila was not only a valiant warrior, but also a subtle psychologist, capable of controlling his opponent's emotions. The attack, which began at the height of the Teutonic Knights' exhaustion, was the logical conclusion to this psychological warfare. Like this example of military cunning if you enjoyed it. What you are about to learn may completely change your understanding of how medieval armies operated in the real conditions of huge battles. The battle unfolded rapidly and fiercely. It all began with a powerful onslaught by the Lithuanian Russian banners, led by Grand Duke Vytautas. His troops, which included the swift Tatar cavalry, attacked the right wing of the Teutonic Order under the command of Grand Marshal Friedrich von Wallenrod. It was a storm-like attack. Thousands of horsemen, accompanied by the roar and whistling of arrows, descended upon the enemy, seeking to break through their ranks and shake the confidence of the Order's knights. From the very beginning, Vytautas' forces encountered incredibly stubborn resistance. Wallenrod's banners consisted of knights hardened by dozens of campaigns, accustomed to heavy battles and trained to maintain their formation under any circumstances. They did not flinch under the first onslaught, On the contrary, they regrouped competently, withstood the blow, and began to slowly but surely push the Lithuanian Russian regiments back. A veritable meat grinder broke out on the right flank. Horses snorted, weapons clanged, arrows rained down, and the ground turned into a mess of mud and blood. About an hour after the battle began, Vytautas decided on a move that many historians still debate. Some consider it brilliant, others extremely risky. He ordered his right wing, consisting of Lithuanians and Tatars, to begin a feigned retreat. In essence, the troops were to feign panic, as if the onslaught of the knights was too strong. It was a knife-edge move. The slightest mistake, and it would have turned into a disaster rather than a ruse. A real retreat that could have destroyed the entire alliance. However, the plan worked perfectly. Grand Marshal Wallenrod, observing the retreating Lithuanian banners, decided that the enemy was broken. He made the cardinal mistake, a mistake made in many medieval battles. He got carried away with the pursuit. Confident that victory was near, he ordered his knights to advance faster and faster, losing their formation, order, and discipline. Only the excitement of the chase remained on the field, and that was exactly what Vytautas wanted. The so-called Tatar trick, widely known among the steppe peoples, worked flawlessly. Its purpose was to lure the enemy into pursuit, stretch their forces, break their formation, and exhaust their men and horses. The Lithuanians and Tatars skillfully simulated a chaotic retreat, shouting, throwing down their banners, and scattering in small groups. The Knights of Wallenrod rushed after them, but the further they advanced, the more their ranks transformed from an organized fighting machine into a huge, uncontrollable crowd that had lost all form. The feigned retreat became one of the key moments of the entire Battle of Grunwald. It was this maneuver that changed the pace, disrupted the enemy's plans, and foreshadowed the future defeat of the order. Do you think the feigned retreat was the main factor in the success? Or was the victory secured by the steadfastness of the Polish banners in the center? While a cunning trap was being set on the right flank, a battle of unprecedented ferocity was raging in the center. The Polish banners, which formed the backbone of Jagailo's army, stood against the main forces of the Teutonic Order, commanded personally by the Grand Master. It was a clash of two steel walls where every meter of ground had to be won in fierce combat. The battle began with a frontal attack by the Teutonic heavy cavalry, considered the best in Europe. The Polish knights met this blow with all their fortitude. The first onslaught of the Crusaders was so powerful that the ranks of the Polish banners faltered. The battle entered a phase of exhausting, close combat. Warriors on both sides fought in tight formation, using swords, spears, and axes. At one point in the battle, the Teutonic Order achieved significant success. One of the banners, which carried the main Polish standard, was knocked over and lost its flag. The fall of the banner was a terrible omen. It was considered a sign of defeat and could cause panic throughout the army. The loss of the banner caused temporary confusion in the ranks of the Polish troops. However, the Polish knights quickly recovered from the shock. Thanks to the intervention of reserves and the personal valor of the commanders, the banner was quickly recaptured, and the banner once again took its place in the ranks. This critical moment was overcome thanks to the iron discipline and high morale of the Polish troops, who did not allow the enemy to build on their success. Grand Master Ulrich von Jungingen, seeing that his elite knights could not break the Polish resistance, decided to personally lead the reserves. He brought the Order's last untouched forces into battle, attempting to deliver a decisive blow to the center of the Polish formation. It was an extremely risky decision, but Jungingen believed that only his presence could turn the tide of battle. The Grand Master's personal involvement, although it inspired his troops, proved fatal for the Order. Jungingen found himself in the thick of the battle, where he was surrounded and fell from the blow of one of the Polish warriors. The death of the commander-in-chief had a decisive impact on the morale of the Teutonic Knights. An intriguing hook at the beginning. What if I showed you how one moment changed the history of Europe? The death of Grand Master Ulrich von Jungingen was the critical moment that collapsed the Teutonic Order's front and led to its crushing defeat. He was not just a commander, but a spiritual and military leader, and his fall instantly demoralized the knights, who had been held together only by his charisma and determination. His heroic but reckless attempt to break through the Polish center resulted in complete disaster for the order. As soon as news of the master's fall spread through the ranks of the Crusaders, discipline and order began to rapidly collapse. The knights who just a minute ago had been fighting with fanatical determination now thought only of salvation. Without central command, the elite banners began a disorganized retreat, which quickly turned into a panicked flight. At that moment, Vytautas' Lithuanian and Russian regiments returned to the battlefield. Vytautas' troops, who had previously feigned retreat, now struck the flanks of the Teutonic Order. Their return came as a complete surprise to the Crusaders. The knights, already demoralized by the loss of their master, found themselves trapped between the Polish banners in the center and Vytautas' swift cavalry on the flanks. It was a classic pincer maneuver that led to encirclement. Polish and Lithuanian warriors began pursuing the fleeing enemy. The battle turned into a rout. The heavily armed knights of the order, unable to move quickly, became easy prey for the light Lithuanian cavalry. Many tried to find refuge in the nearby forests and swamps, but their pursuers caught up with them there as well. Some units of the Teutonic Order, seeing the hopelessness of their situation, tried to put up organized resistance. However, these were only local pockets of resistance, which were quickly suppressed by the superior forces of the Allies. The full power of the Teutonic military machine was finally broken. By evening, the battlefield had been completely cleared of the Order's organized forces. The death of the Grand Master and the collapse of the front marked the end of Teutonic invincibility. In your opinion, what was the main reason why the Knights of the Order succumbed to panic so quickly after the death of the Grand Master? The Battle of Grunwald went down in history not only as a great victory for the Allies, but also as one of the most brutal and bloody battles of medieval Europe. The scale of the losses suffered by the Teutonic Order shocked contemporaries and left a deep mark on the political and military history of the region. These losses were not just heavy. They were so devastating that the Order lost its ability to quickly recover and regain its former power. In a single day, not only did the Order's military potential collapse, but so did its political influence, which was based on the idea of invincibility. According to historians' estimates, the Teutonic Order lost about 8,000 knights, squires, and heavy infantry. This number is particularly striking when one considers that the Order never had a large army. Of the 250 knight brothers who formed the steel backbone of the monastic state, almost half were killed. Losses that could not be compensated for either by training new recruits or by an influx of guests. Among the fallen were many senior commanders, including Grand Master Ulrich von Jungingen himself, as well as almost all key leaders, grand marshals, commanders, and treasurers. It was a blow comparable to decapitation. The Order lost the people who had ruled it for decades. About 14,000 people were taken prisoner, a huge number for that time. Among them were many noble European knights who had come to Prussia on a holy crusade, hoping to gain glory in the fight against the pagans. Their capture was a political blow. Rumors spread throughout Europe that the once unshakable Order had fallen to the barbarians, and the prestige of the Crusaders plummeted. In addition, the captives were of enormous financial value. Ransoms could bring huge sums to the Allies, strengthening their influence and undermining the economic position of the Order. Among those killed were such famous figures as Grand Marshal Friedrich von Wallenrod and Grand Commander Kuno von Liechtenstein, men whose names inspired fear in their enemies and respect in their allies. Their deaths created a huge power vacuum that no one could quickly fill. The Order, strictly based on hierarchy and discipline, lost almost all of its senior officers, which paralyzed its ability to conduct major military campaigns for many years. If you want, I can expand the text even more, or emphasize the political consequences, diplomacy, logistics, or the Order's post-war collapse. After their triumph at Grunwald, the Allies immediately marched on the capital of the Teutonic Order, Marienburg Castle. Jagailo's main goal was not only to defeat the army, but also to destroy the very center of Teutonic power, which would ensure a final resolution to the conflict. The siege of Marienburg was the second key episode of this war. The fortress of Marienburg, now known as Malburg, was one of the most powerful and impregnable in Europe. The castle had triple walls, a complex system of towers and moats, and was built according to the latest medieval fortification techniques. Its defense was led by Heinrich von Plauen, a commander from Sweden who did not participate in the Battle of Grunwald and retained his sanity. The siege began, but progressed extremely slowly. Jagiello, fearing heavy losses during the assault, preferred to conduct a prolonged siege, hoping to wear down the fortress. However, von Plauen had sufficient supplies and organized an exceptionally stubborn and skillful defense. He used artillery and catapults to damage Polish positions. Time was against the Allies. The huge army, assembled from many banners, could not remain in the field for long. Problems with food and discipline began, and many vassals, especially from Western Europe, began to leave the camp, considering their mission accomplished. The autumn weather also worsened conditions. The most serious blow was that the Knights of the Order, who were in remote garrisons, began to gather their forces and launch a counteroffensive. Heinrich von Plauen, seeing the siege weakening, sent messengers throughout Europe calling for help. Soon, mercenaries and knights from Livonia began to arrive at the order. As a result, after 2 months of fruitless siege, Jogaila was forced to retreat. By failing to take Marienburg, he was unable to achieve the complete surrender of the Teutonic Order, which became his biggest strategic mistake after his great victory. This mistake allowed the order to regroup and avoid complete destruction. Despite the failure at Marienburg, the order was critically weakened. It lost not only its army, but also most of its possessions, which came under the control of its allies. Most importantly, the myth of its invincibility was shattered, which had enormous psychological significance for the whole of Europe. The Great War officially ended in 1411 with the signing of the First Peace of Thorn. This treaty was concluded in the important trading city of Thorn, which became the meeting place for delegations from Poland, Lithuania, and the Teutonic Order. The document legally enshrined the results that the Allies had achieved thanks to their outstanding victory at Grunwald. However, it turned out to be much less radical than expected in Krakow and Vilnius. Poland and Lithuania hoped to finally crush the Teutonic Order, but diplomatic intervention and pressure from some European rulers made the terms of the peace more moderate. Nevertheless, even such a treaty was a blow to the order, from which it never recovered. The main territorial acquisition of the Allies was Samogitia. This region was of great importance, as it was through it that important trade routes and dangerous border areas passed, which had been the cause of armed conflicts for decades. Under the terms of the treaty, the order was obliged to transfer this strategic region to Lithuanian rule, but only for the duration of the lives of King Jogaila and Grand Duke Vytautas. After their deaths, the lands were to return to the order's control, which left room for a new political crisis. Many contemporaries considered this clause too lenient, as Samogitia had long been a symbol of Lithuania's struggle for independence. Poland received the Dobrzyn region, which had changed hands many times, and was an important part of the border between the two states. In addition, the Allies demanded that the order pay a huge contribution of 100,000 Prague groschen. This was an absolutely colossal sum, comparable to the annual budget of several European kingdoms. The payment of such an amount was a real shock to the order's financial system, as its treasury had already been significantly depleted during the war itself. Thus, although the First Peace of Thorn was not a complete and unconditional victory for the Allies, it nevertheless marked the beginning of the inevitable decline of the Teutonic Order as a great European power. The victory at Grunwald was a fatal blow that destroyed the military power of the order, and the peace treaty only cemented this outcome, turning it into a legal verdict that could not be challenged or changed. The Battle of Grunwald almost instantly entered the annals of European history, becoming one of the greatest and most vivid symbols of resistance to foreign aggression in the east of the continent. Its significance far exceeded that of a purely military triumph, becoming the foundation for the formation of national identity in Poland, Lithuania, and later other nations of Eastern Europe, for whom this day became the embodiment of strength, courage, and unity. The victory of the united Polish-Lithuanian forces showed that states previously torn apart by internal conflicts and pressure from powerful neighbors were capable of uniting in the face of a common enemy and achieving a breakthrough in the protracted struggle for influence in the region. It was Grunwald that secured their place on the political map of Europe and showed that the era of unilateral pressure from the Teutonic Order was coming to an end. For Poland, Grunwald became one of the high points of national history, a symbol of rebirth, political consolidation, and military power. The victory significantly enhanced the prestige of the ruling Jagiellonian dynasty, demonstrating that the new unified monarchy was capable of successfully resisting one of the most disciplined and well-equipped military machines in medieval Europe. This success accelerated the process of state consolidation, contributed to the strengthening of royal power, and marked the beginning of a long period of cultural, economic, and political prosperity, which later became known as the Golden Age of Poland. It was in the following decades that Poland became one of the major players in Central Europe. For Lithuania, the battle was no less significant and in many ways even more fateful. Grunwald confirmed not only the legitimacy and necessity of the union with Poland, but also Lithuania's right to the strategically important Samogitia, a region for which the order had fought for over a century. It was after 1410 that the European powers began to take the territorial integrity of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania much more seriously. Grand Duke Vytautas, whose role in the battle was long debated, especially in connection with his famous feigned retreat, became a national hero, the embodiment of Lithuanian cunning, military genius, and the ability to maneuver between different political forces. His name has become firmly embedded in the cultural memory of the people. The victory was the result not only of numerical superiority, but also of the skillful use of terrain, the competent distribution of forces, deceptive maneuvers, and a level of cooperation between allied armies that was rare for that era. The Battle of Grunwald is still cited as an example of a combination of military prowess, political calculation, and strategic genius. We have come to the end of our story about the Battle of Grunwald. This battle in 1410 was more than just a battle. It became a watershed moment in the history of Central and Eastern Europe. Secondly, it demonstrates that military victory is not only a matter of numerical superiority or bravery, but also the art of psychological warfare, strategic planning, and tactical cunning. Ulrich von Jungingen lost because he was too confident and impatient. Finally, it proves that the myth of invincibility collapses sooner or later. The Teutonic Order, which for centuries had sown fear and asserted its dominance, was defeated in a single day. Grunwald became the death knell for the medieval idea of the Crusade as an instrument of conquest and colonization. The legacy of this battle still lives on in the national consciousness of peoples, becoming a symbol of resilience and the will to freedom. Which of Jogaila and Vytautas' tactical tricks do you think was the most ingenious? Was it the feigned retreat of the Lithuanian flank, or the psychological exhaustion of the enemy under the sun? Suggest topics for future videos you would like to see in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on new research into the military tricks of the past.